Two men who separately created online apps to auction Muslim women online in what came to be called the Sulli and the Bulli Bai deals have been given bail, while others continue to languish for months altogether. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. Today, we're doing a deep dive into what appears to be selective principles and ad hocism in our judiciary's response to the question of bail. Now, it is widely agreed upon as a principle of jurisprudence that bail should, in fact, be the norm, not the exception. But in India, we've seen a number of very high profile arrests play out extremely differently. We now have the absolutely egregious so called Sulli and Bulli Bai deals, the accused in these cases being granted bail on so called humanitarian grounds. And in other cases, admittedly, where the charges are much graver under anti terror laws, we are seeing people being denied bail in hearing after hearing. Is the way our courts are looking at the principle of bail completely selective, subjective, and ad hoc? Let's introduce our guests on the program today. We are joined by Neha. Neha, of course, is Neha Singhal is a lawyer and she works with the Vidhi Legal Center. Welcome, Neha. It's great to have you back. We're joined in the program also by Fatima Khan. Fatima is a journalist with the Quint, but also was one of the women who found herself at the receiving end of those odious Sulli and Bulli Bai deals. We're also joined by Geeta Bhatt. Geeta Bhatt is a professor of history at the Delhi University. And we're also joined by well-known lawyer Kailash Vasdev, who's a senior advocate with a practice in the Supreme Court. Thank you very much, everybody. Let me start with you, Fatima, if I can, because this is personal for you. And, you know, we know how women are harassed and bullied online, but when you're female and you're Muslim, there is a kind of double jeopardy. You're doubly vulnerable, you're doubly targeted, as we saw both with the sort of Sulli and Bulli Bai so called deals. When you heard or read the news about the perpetrators in these cases getting bail, what is the first thing you thought? Because, you know, as a journalist, you know that bail is the norm or should be. But as the impacted person, I'm sure the emotions can be quite different.
Yeah, but at the onset, I'd like to make it very clear that this isn't an all women issue. Of course, all women are harassed, but this was an issue of Muslim women being targeted, facing targeted harassment, auction online, and that wasn't it, right? Like even after the arrest, there were Twitter spaces and clubhouse spaces where Muslim women and their private parts was discussed at length. That is the kind of normalized harassment and abuse virtually and otherwise that Muslim women are expected to just take lying down. With this bail, I really think it's detrimental to the cause of any sort of justice that any Muslim woman would have fathomed in this country at this day and age. I remember speaking to, there's a group of us, there's a bunch of us who were targeted at the time. And the minute this news came out, someone I know, had a panic attack. Someone else I know felt just so triggered by that news. I was on the field, but I can tell you that as someone who's on the field, I cover communalism, I cover hate crimes, I cover politics, and which means that I'm really in the thick of it at all times and meeting people who might as well just be the ones who are auctioning me online or laying a price down for me. I remember when a week after the Bulli Bai deals episode happened, I had gone out to UP for election coverage, and some person there recognized me. And when someone recognizes you as a journalist, it should be ideally a moment of joy that okay, someone recognizes me for my work. But in that moment, my most natural first instinct was that, oh no, he's seen my pictures being sold online. uh, and thankfully that wasn't the case, and he was just someone who had followed my work. But just that moment was so horrifying, and it made me feel that I shouldn't have to go through that. I shouldn't, as a journalist, I shouldn't have to feel that, oh no, they're coming out for me because they've seen my private pictures leaked online, which are being sold. And with this bail now, it puts me and several other people, all these women, right, are poets, activists, journalists, they occupy the public space. So by definition, we're all interacting with the public, we are out on the field, we are doing something or the other that means that this is no longer just a virtual crime. Oftentimes we reduce it to being something that I remember even at the time, so many people, especially during the Sulli Deals episode, there was just such lack of outrage because people were just, the victims, were just expected to, understand that, okay, this isn't really a crime per se. There's just some pictures that were already out there. What's the big deal? It's not like they're really auctioning you. That was the kind of argument that I heard from many people.
So
But this is what
I
it
did.
does. It puts your physical safety at risk.
I was just going to ask you exactly that. That do you today feel unsafe after reading about this bail order?
I felt unsafe since the day the Sully Deals episode happened. Of very honestly, at that time, in fact, there wasn't even an arrest. And when after the Bulli Bai case and there was an arrest, I know many people were even lauding that as a sign of a progressive law and order system. I, even at the time, was very cynical about how this is going to pan out. Like you said earlier, you know. This is, of course, a very selective understanding and application of bail being the norm and not and like I said, this sets a precedence, because even at the time I remember so many people claiming, like, I don't know if they were actually behind Sulli Deals and Bully Bai or not, but they were actually taking responsibility for it. What does that mean? When you take responsibility for a crime online on Twitter, you're basically saying that I know I enjoy full impunity, so I can publicly declare that I was behind it, and I know
Yeah.
no one will be able to touch me. So when these people go out on bail, it sets the absolute wrong precedent, and I'm afraid something like this might happen again.
Yeah, I'll share with you that a couple of years ago, my number was shared on a escort site, and I was then deluged with pictures of male nudes, and I could not succeed with all my years in journalism in being able to get the police to move. A couple of arrests were made very reluctantly, and they were out on bail actually within weeks. So um, this is I hear you. I feel what you're feeling. And to be Muslim and female, that is targeted in a way that, women anyway are targeted, but to be targeted for your religion and your gender together, I can only imagine what you must be experiencing, Fatima. And most all power to you, all strength to all of you for fighting this and taking it on. Mr. Kailash Vasdev, there is something skewed in our system where the courts talk about the sort of humanitarian grounds on which men like these should get bail. But on the other hand, when it came to, let's say, a Stan Swami who was in his 80s, there was no such humanitarian instinct shown by our courts. I do take the point that the terror charges are a different category, are a different basket of charges, and that the anti terror law, by definition, makes that bail much more difficult to get. But, sir, as a senior advocate, are you disappointed with the way the principle of bail is being applied in our country today?
Blunt answer, yes. It is selective, finding it very difficult to understand what's going on, because bail is a matter which way back in the 70s was jail is not an answer. Bail or jail was the opening lines of a judgment. Today, what has happened is we have changed the institutional norms in their entirety. There is no steadfast norm. Bail has got basically three conditions. He won't escape the case, he will not tamper with the evidence, and he'll be available for the trial. These are the three norms under which we have always looked at bails. Unfortunately, now times have changed, judges take different views, and there is no consistency. Economic offenses. I give you two examples. People arrested for 10 years are then acquitted. They've been in custody for 8. In another instance, man was in custody for 9 years. In a charge of rape, he was acquitted. So there are a lot of cases where you spend 8 to 9 years in jail where offenses go up to life imprisonment, and then you get acquitted. That is a very, very sad commentary, because till you are not proved to be guilty, you are supposed to be out as a free person. We're not following the French code, we are following the law which says innocent till proved guilty, not guilty till proved innocent. But it has become the norm today. Economic offenses. There is a case which is pending. If you remember the Spectrum case of 2012, the Supreme Court granted bail. Eventually, nothing happened in the Spectrum case. It all turned out to be a dud case. But those officers, those persons who were convicted, some of them were convicted for different reasons, but not for the Spectrum scam. So if you look at the overall judicial perspective, I personally feel we need to relook at the whole system of bails. We got to look at another in this particular case where these three youngsters have been putting up all sorts of nasty pictures about ladies and putting them up for sale. Why should they be released on jail within 3 months? There is no earthly reason. And your investigations are still going on. One of the reasons for granting bail is you will interfere with the investigation. Yet you release these three during the pendency of investigations when the others are still in custody. And they are the creators of this particular website. It is pan-India. So you must get down to see who all are involved before you release such persons on bail. As far as prosecution is concerned, prosecution takes cases selectively to their convenience and does not look at the case in the overall perspective. Look at the charges framed in this. IT Act, 509, and a little bit of an obscenity. What about the main cases that you have caused so much damage to the reputation of the individual? Don't we have a responsibility towards that? Aren't the police being selective in even the charges which they are framing? There is so much more which can be done in the criminal domain, in the framing of charges and bringing these people to judge. And you turn around and say, no, they're very young, so therefore let them go. It is not making sense.
And the most egregious part of it is the emphasis on this so-called youthfulness of the accused
That's
in this.
exactly what I'm saying.
Absolutely, I am agreeing. I'm just reiterating what you've said, that it is absolutely egregious, and something very similar happened in an IIT rape accused case, where too the High Court had a lot to say about the future, as it were, of the young man at the heart of the allegations. And somehow I find that our courts are able to take quite a lenient view when it comes to violence against women. And make no mistake, we must emphasize that these online auctions are an expression of a violent abuse, and they're not about pranksters putting up pictures. And let us make no mistake about the consequences to the sense of well-being that Fatima, I think, has already shared her feelings about. Professor Geeta Bhatt, I know that irrespective of political leanings, you've often spoken for women and with women. When you see this bail being granted so soon to the men who did this, does it dishearten you? Does it dishearten you? Especially when it's contrasted with the number of also young men and sometimes old men who we've seen on other charges who do not get bail. There's a whole series of UAP arrests by contrast. Go ahead, Geeta Bhatt.
Well, Barkhaji, see, we have been, indeed, anyone who has been in any kind of conspiracy which is against women, irrespective of their religion, the law must take that very seriously, and the perpetrators, they must be, after due diligence, deliberation, must give them whatever, as per Indian law, as per IPC, they are required to be given punishment for. Uh, Largely, we have seen that in the Indian courts, they have, based on the merit of the case and as per the provisions of the IPC code, they have been given bail to those who are the accused. They are the accused. Now, for example, like there are many cases. This is one case. Although you yourself said that the court given has given them bail with this understanding that these are the first time offenders, and any kind of a prolonged incarceration, it could be detrimental. It would be very detrimental on them. Keeping in this mind, they are giving them bail. But there are some other cases also which one is surprised to see. For example, there was in Gorakhpur, there was this case where Dilshad Hussain, someone who was charged of raping a minor girl, and he was being charged. He was charged under POXO, and he was given a bail by the court. So there are such instances which are there, which we see that at
Well,
times,
I
which
would
we
say I would.
understand that it would be based on the merit of the. We understand there would be some understanding that the judge has given the bail to him, but what I'm trying to say is that there are many such instances which can be seen where the bail has been given.
But
So the
shouldn't there
point is
be
that
some
it is.
uniform principle instead of the individual judge who decides this? That's the problem. There's no legal precedent that is determining what circumstances be. It's all up to the judge. Jo judge ki marzi hai. There was a judge, a woman judge, who famously spoke about how if there's no direct contact with skin, even if it's a adult perpetrator and a child being accused, that is not child sexual abuse. So Geeta ji, with respect, I would argue that the problem is that there seems to be a ad hocism in the legal system, and b and I might be hauled up for contempt for asking this. Is there a mahal that is created around certain cases where bail becomes impossible and a wider acceptability around other cases? And judges are human. Are judges getting impacted by the external climate, the external conversations around these cases? Neha, can I take that to you? Neha, go ahead.
I was nodding so vigorously at the questions that you were asking. I think what you're saying is just, it's true. A case like a UAPA, a case under a UAP is unlikely to get bail. A case under NDPS is unlikely to get bail. A case under POCSO should ideally, POCSO makes it hard to get bail, but people get bail quite easily under POCSO. And in violence against women, bail happens quite easily. In this particular case, the highest offense is of stalking, which has a maximum punishment of 5 years. So the offenses that they have been charged with are all minor offenses. None of them even make it beyond 3 years, and maximum beyond 5 years. So there is a legal precedent about regarding bail, where if it's a minor offense, you're more likely to get bail than if it's a serious offense that leads to death or life imprisonment, which is what Umar Khalid has been charged with. All the offenses that he's been charged with are punishable with death or life imprisonment. So his case, and he's charged under UAPA, so he's unlikely to get bail because courts, the UAP itself.
Neha, okay, chalo, Omar Khalid, the argument would be made that the charges that he's framed under are terror charges. I am drawing a contrast, let's say, with Aryan Khan. Aryan Khan, Shah Rukh Khan's son, who gets picked up on the charges of peddling drugs.
Yes.
There was almost sort of more focus on him as an alleged perpetrator than there has been on these men who have dared to so-called sell Muslim women online. And that is where the contrast becomes really apparent
Yes.
in the attitudinal response of the people,
Absolutely.
the media.
Absolutely. So one thing that you said was that, is this now, do we leave this to individual judicial discretion, which is true, because there are certain principles that Kailash himself said on bail, how bail can be granted, on in what circumstances bail can be granted. Some judges choose not to grant bail for various reasons.
Sorry, Neha, go ahead.
CRPC under section
Hang on, Neha. I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Neha. Let me bring in Fatima at this point. I can't hear Neha. Let me bring in Fatima okay. Okay, let me actually try and reconnect to Neha. Neha, I lost you briefly there. Just jump right back in and complete your point.
Barkha, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, please.
All right. So I was saying that that our law itself says that if it's a youthful offender, they needn't even be sent to prison. They can be sent to probation instead. So we are kind to youthful offenders. By that logic, we should have been kind to Aryan Khan as well. But we choose to be kind to some, and we choose to ignore others, or we choose to be more deterrent-based to others. And the fact that we are being kind only to those who are committing violence against women is very worrisome. But the thing is that what we can't, at least I believe, what we can't lose focus on is that bail is a matter of right. And Aryan Khan should have gotten bail, and Umar Khalid should get bail, and these people by law should be getting bail. It's the fact that others don't that makes these people getting bail so egregious. So as a researcher, as somebody who wants to be neutral, all I can say is that it's not disappointing that they have gotten bail. It's disappointing the attitude that leads to these people getting bail.
Hmm. Fatima, do you want to come in on that? Because obviously, as somebody impacted by this targeted harassment, it would be difficult for you to put your own sense of vulnerability and rage aside right now and argue in support of the principle of bail. We cannot expect the survivor of sexual abuse and violent threats to be that generous. But as a journalist, and because I know you cover these issues, how do you separate all of these strands? Neha is making the point that there should be a common principle of bail applied to everybody. And it's the denial of bail in so many cases that makes the granting of bail in your case so particularly offensive. What do you say to that, Fatima?
See, in principle, of course, I agree, right? In principle, I do agree. But the problem is that principles are only applicable if this debate in itself is not lopsided. To begin with, this is such a lopsided debate, right? When we are arguing that, oh, no case can be looked in isolation in the social political context that we are living in right now. And as Kailash sir earlier argued, that this was a pan India issue. There are so many others who were probably behind it who's still not been arrested, and the only way via which we can get to them, the police and judicial system can through to them, is via the ones who are already been arrested, as it's been established by extensive reporting done by multiple media organizations. All of these men and women, many of them were women, just to point that out, were
Hmm.
working in tandem with each other. This was a very well established web and network, and there have been only a few of them who've been arrested so far, which means that there are many who are out there still in their homes waiting for these men and women to come out on bail in order to continue doing what they've been doing. Remember, when I was auctioned for the first time in Sulli deals, even though that got a name, and that is something that ultimately led to some kind of scrutiny and coverage, before that, I remember the Eid that passed before that, there was a smaller bunch of women. I wasn't a part of that group of women who were auctioned online as well. No one talks about it, and people only remember Sulli deals and Bulli Bai because it ended up getting that traction, and that's just the nature of social media. Before that, I remember, even before that, there were women auction online on YouTube. And we are not even talking about who are the men behind those. So, okay, sure, these men deserve bail, but what about those men? Why aren't they being arrested? Why isn't there any connection of sorts being any effort to make a connection or to understand the connection between those men and these men? When you already put them out on bail, you're effectively losing that thread.
And also, I find really offensive the kind of observations from the courts on humanitarianism and what will happen to the future of these men. And if
And
only our legal system.
just Barkha, just to add, I'm young too. I'm youthful too. My youth is also at peril and at stake when these things happen with me.
Absolutely,
Who will care
absolutely.
about my youth, and who will care about my youthfulness that is dying down with every passing day quicker than it should? I shouldn't be having this conversation as 20 something year old.
I
And none
could
of these
I
girls should either. So I'd be great if the court or the system can care for me and my youth for once.
Well said. I agree with you. I can see Mr. PK Jain, veteran IPS officer, joining us. I'll get him in just a moment. Namaskar, sir. Kailash Vasdev, if you'd like to jump in on that, Neha's point that it is, and I know what Fatima feels, and this is not the time to sort of, do gyanbazi with survivors of abuse on bail being this a principle. But the point is the court not even making a comment on what the women went through in the granting of bail, not even a warning to the accused that if we dare to find you doing this again, I mean, there could be something more, even when you grant bail, said by the court that addresses the vulnerability and the anger of the women.
See, the fact is that when you grant bail, you put persons on conditions. The conditions can vary. I do not know that I do not see the bail order before me. I haven't seen it. But there must have been some stipulations in which these people must have been restrained from doing certain things. Yeah, I personally feel that a court is also responsible for protecting the victims or the persons who are affected. I'm reasonably sure that in the bail order here, there'll be some restrictions on these people. It would be unfair to comment without saying the order, but the fact of the matter is that bail needs to be looked at in a more serious manner than we are looking at it today. We cannot have different directions, different views in the granting of bail because there are just three provisions in the Act, 437, 438, 439 of the CRPC which deals with bail. There are some offenses where bail is not available, like, for example, NDPS, money lending, money laundering. So there are cases which have a different kind of an approach. But the fact of the matter is, in all matters, stipulations and conditions for grant of bail should be made more difficult. We are granting bail in offenses which have very serious social
But,
fallout.
I want to say this to Mr. PK Jain that, and maybe this is because I'm reacting as a woman here, but I actually think that white collar crimes, however grave the charges may be, I would feel more secure having those men or women out on bail than I would be. At the thought of those who have perpetrated abuse, online lynching, sexual violence, that seems because there's a feeling that those men when out could be actively dangerous to one's sense of self. So it's a very different thing, and maybe the problem is the law. Mr. PK Jain, how do you see the lack of uniformity in how our courts are applying the principle of bail? Before you joined a little late. We were talking about Stan Swami, Umar Khalid, all the UAP arrests where bail is denied, all the sort of narcotics related arrests where bail is difficult. And then you have the Sulli and Bulli deals where Fatima is among the Muslim women who were sold online. Obviously, these were not real sales, sold, that's why in quotes. And those men are out, and the court is concerned about the future of these men. Mr. Jain.
Barkha, I'm extremely sorry that I joined late. I was, in fact, looking forward to this program, but at the last minute, it happened that I just forgot to log in. See, categorizing certain offenses, bailable and non-bailable, is not the right thing to do. I just heard that maybe the white collar crime people can be bailed out. See, a guy who has taken away.
I said that.
The offense is equally serious because a person who runs away with any other individual's life savings and leaves him high and dry, with whatever little he had, is a very serious offender. Because you see in the case of Supertech, you see in the case of a number of builders in Noida and Greater Noida, the people have duped thousands of investors, thousands of home buyers, people who were looking forward to their homes. Now they are saddled with bank loans, they are saddled with their personal liabilities, and now they are not getting any houses. So they are no less offenders. So everybody should be. It is in fact the individual cases. It is very difficult to pin down saying that this particular offense is bailable, this is not bailable. Here the bail should be granted. But yet I find that in the courts today, the bail is granted on the whims and fancies of the individual judges. See, a child of 2 years, 5 years, 6 years being raped, and there the offender being looked at with compassion and humanity and humanitarian grounds. I just can't understand the logic of it. I mean, a person who should be hanged, who should be the maximum punishment should be awarded to him. There also somebody gets into the business of looking at the humanitarian angle. There was a high court judge, a lady high court judge in Maharashtra, who said that unless there's a skin touch, it does not tantamount to an offense under POCSO. So you have individual views, not at the lower judiciary level, even at the higher judiciary level. It is very, very unfortunate. In this particular, I am a votary of people remaining locked up for the simple reason that one has to make out exemplary cases to send a message down the line that this kind of a thing will not be tolerated. I'll just give you one small example. Maharashtra Control of Organized Crime Act, MCOC as we commonly call it. Now, MCOCA, ever since it has been introduced, the bail conditions have become very, very stringent. Earlier, the gangsters who used to take it as a matter of right that within 2 months they'll be out to again commit similar offenses of extortion, robbery, firing, and things like that. Now, people are behind bars for years now, which has sent a very clear message down the line that wherever MCSO is applied, the guy is not only going to not get bail, but will also be convicted, and the conviction rate was as high as 92%. So therefore, in order to send a message down to the people who are the real offenders, now who are the real offenders in the sense that what kind of a punishment should be awarded to them? It does not require any very big knowledge of law, or one does not have to be a legal expert. It is a common sensibility that you find that the offense is heinous, and yet a lenient view is being taken on humanitarian grounds, which ought not to be taken. I mean, I have been a police officer.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you actually say that bail should not be the norm. That there should be a reason to grant bail. Most people are arguing that bail should be given freely and uniformly, not selectively.
Should not be. It should not be. The only thing Only thing here, Barkha, one has to be a little careful about is that this kind of a diktat that bail should not be ordinarily granted can also be misused by the police officers or the investigating agencies. So that is one had to guard against. Now, the rider there is that whoever misuses the concept of arrest and bail not being granted, that person, if he makes a wrongful arrest, then the action taken against him should be very, very harsh. Unfortunately, in our system, any government officer accused of wrongdoing gets away very lightly, whether he's in the municipal corporation or in the police or in the administration or in revenue department. That is the most unfortunate part. The people think that they are absolutely above law. Now, whoever misuses these sections of a wrongful arrest, wrongful detention, they should be tackled with in the shortest possible time, and that too very, very sternly. In fact, they should be sent home.
And I'm very interested to hear your comment that actually bail should be granted less generously than it is. Geeta Bhatt, if you want to come in on that.
Well, Barkhaji, you see, definitely it is something which is a little debatable, and it's subject to the case, that is being discussed. I think all the points that have been made here, they do have a merit, and that we need to look into this, that especially whenever a bail is being granted, whatever, irrespective of what the crime has been committed, it is important that those who are in the judiciary, they need to be very, very sensitive, and they need to look at these cases in a very objective manner. But then we do know, we have Barkhaji seen Nirbhaya's case. How can we ever forget that one of the accused, who had, in fact, in the most heinous and brutal way, had attacked Nirbhaya, he was released, he was rehabilitated. Delhi government had also provided him some means to rehabilitate him just because he was a juvenile. So, these are the cases which are right in front of us. There where somebody, a woman had lost her life. She was so brutally raped. It is not some kind of an, online harassment we are talking about. It was, and there are many such cases which we can see. In Kamlesh Tiwari's case, when he was killed, one of the main accused, he was released, within a month, he was released on 20,000 rupees bond. So there are innumerable number of such cases which can be put forth. But my objection is, if you can give me just 10 seconds. My objection is that this is being compared with, because time and again, Umar Khalid's photograph is being shown here, that why he is not being released. You see, all these people, they have been charged under UAPA. Right, and these cases are serious. Those who are, whether it is under NSA or now under UAPA, Kamlesh Tiwari was charged under NSA, so he, for months together, he was under jail. He was jailed. He had not, neither he had, incited any riots nor anything, but he was, because at that time the dispensation or the courts, they felt that he was, what he did was wrong. So there are innumerable such cases. I don't think that these are comparable cases that we try to say that, why Umar Khalid is not being given bail, or, some of the other people who are showing.
I did preface in the beginning that the charges are very different, but there has to be some uniform principle of bail that the courts apply. Either it depends on the charge or it depends on the punishable offense. But as Mr. P.K. Jain said, Neha, right now it seems to depend, one, on what the individual judge thinks, two, what the dominant narrative is outside of the court.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no doubt about this. And I don't think there is any way to prevent this. We are talking, so bail matters are largely heard by in magistrates' courts, which are your lowest criminal courts in the country. Who are these courts being populated by? What are these people listening to? What are these people being educated in? They are largely men. They belong to the same social circle which thinks women are expendable, which thinks drugs, even cannabis, is bad, which thinks that if you are waging a war against the state, and if there is a conspiracy, and Trump is coming in, which is why all of these people decided to do this. These are the people, they make up our society. How do we expect legal norms to reach them? There are legal norms. There is 437, 438, 439 of the CRPC. There are Supreme Court judgments which tell you in what situations bail can be given, but that doesn't mean anything. How will it reach the lowest court of the country?
Let me take that to PK Jain. I saw you disagreeing. Are you, let me bring you in. You are conservative on bail. You say it should be given less frequently than it is. In this case of the Sulli Bulli deals, would you have given bail, as Mr. Kailash Vasdev said, it hadn't even been 3 months?
See, I would not have granted bail to these people. They should have paid. In such cases, the case should be expedited. It should be expeditiously heard, and judgment should be awarded. In fact, the question of all these things of prolonging cases, the case not coming of a hearing, long dates being given, these are one of the major criminals for the people coming for bail. Otherwise, if the matter is sorted out, it is the judgment is pronounced on whatever basis the evidence before the court. I think that would settle the matter. But in my opinion, a person who has been accused of spreading disaffection in the society should not be easily bailed out unless he has got a very strong reason to do that. Now, recently I heard a case in which a person accused of a rape case was granted bail by the court. He had raped a minor girl. He was granted bail by the court just because his mother was ill. Now, what kind of documents are being presented before the court, whether they are true or false, I don't know. The judge must have taken a reasoned view of that. But on very flimsy grounds, serious offenders are being bailed out. And then they become a threat to the society. Recently, you must have also heard the case of these 2 ladies who had killed 5 children, who had killed actually 16, 5 could be established. And their capital punishment was reduced to life imprisonment just because the punishment could not be carried out because of the bureaucratic delay at whatever level it happened. So these are all very unfortunate cases where, as I said, it is all currently going by the whims and fancies of the individual judges.
Yeah.
And in any case, you cannot lay down a clear-cut norm. You cannot say A, B, C, this should happen, C, D, F, this should happen. It doesn't happen that way. It has to go by the individual merits of the individual case. And in the case of people like Umar Khalid and all that, I don't know, it is not a question of narrative being created outside. It's a question of these people having indulged into anti-national activities. And I'm of the clear opinion that they must pay for their activities, whatever action they've taken against this country.
And indeed, if they are guilty of terrorism, they must be. But let me ask Kailash Vasdev a different question, and then I'll give the last word to Fatima. What if someone is innocent, but the law that they are charged under basically seals their fate? Some of our laws, let's take sedition. There are many politicians now saying the sedition law is archaic and it should go. But the fact is that if you accuse somebody of sedition, it becomes extremely complicated to be able to extricate yourself from that, even if you happen to be innocent. Mr. Vasdev. Can't hear you, sir. You're on mute.
As far as the sedition law is concerned, the courts have taken very different views. You see the Vinod Dua case of late.
Yeah.
Vinod Dua was charged for sedition. They couldn't find anything, and the court took a very strong action. It took a very strong view of it. There have been likewise a large number of cases in the past 2 years where sedition has been frowned upon. Just now, a statement was made that the magistracy is very weak and does not take appropriate action, and there are persons who need to be educated in life. I disagree very, very strongly on this statement. Our magistracy today is an excellent group of young judges who are more liberal and open than we can possibly think. It is these magistrates at the lower level, Mr. Jain will possibly stand by what I'm saying. It is the subordinate judges who exercise more discretions and better discretions in most cases than you can think of. They deal, on an average, a magistrate deals with more than 100 cases a day, and by and large, he passes fair orders. He may have a situation back and forth. Now, in the Supreme Court, we've seen cases where petitions are entertained at night, journalists are granted bails the next morning. On what basis? A magistrate would never do it. He said, no, let the report come, we'll consider it. But the fancies of the judges are more in the superior courts than in the inferior courts. The inferior court goes with a certain amount of dicta, with a certain amount of consideration, with what the prosecutor has to provide. Mr. Jain would be able to tell you, we experience it. We appear in those courts. We appear before the special courts. which are where offences are specially tried for special purposes by the CBI. Now, let me give you an example of CBI trials. Moment a case goes to the CBI, I say the man is acquitted. The reason is you have a charge sheet running into thousands of pages. You have 200 plus witnesses. I've just finished a case of 1983 in which 28 people were accused, 18 died, 6 were acquitted. 83 when they were youngsters. We finished it in 2018, 2017. I mean, so therefore, the blame game will never stop. Rectification of the system is in order, whether it is prosecution, whether
Absolutely.
it is the state,
I'm,
whether
I'm,
it
I'm,
is the judiciary. I'm sorry, I hold ourselves responsible for the morass that we are in. If we are not going to stand up, rectify the situation, blame games will come, NGOs will make statements, press will carry statements, the whole system will then come into a quagmire, and the purpose of justice will stand defeated.
I think that's staggeringly said about the case in 1983 that is coming to fruition only now in 2022. I'm also
16,
reminded
2016.
2016.
2016.
I'm also reminded of Bhavri Devi. It was when I became a journalist. The gang rape of a Dalit woman in Rajasthan was among the first stories I reported. She's still not got justice, even though women like me got Vishakha guidelines thanks to her. So you're right that there is this institutional systemic problem. But let me give Fatima now the last word. Fatima, what is it that you would like people to understand? I think one of the things maybe you could speak to is, somewhere we think that online harassment is a trivial thing with no real consequences. And it's very, very important for people to understand that it has very real consequences.
Yeah, it has been trivialized over and over again. The first time it happened, I remember, people on social media, on my profile, who I follow and who I, look up to in some ways, talking about how, oh, this is just being sold online. In fact, one of the panelists earlier said, okay, it was just an online sale. It wasn't like, an actual case of sexual harassment, which is the problem, which is the mentality. When, our so-called quote unquote gender activists will say that, then where do people like me stand, right? Where do victims like me stand? When you can't, when you, in your very language, you're trivializing how you talk about a crime like this. I know when something like this happens, right? Like I can go on to do my things, I cover things, I'll write about it. I'll find some way to vent about it. But I remember after the Bulli Bai case, I got phone calls from so many young girls who aren't, journalists or who aren't even in public life. They just have a social media account. They might have tweeted once or twice, and they found themselves on the list. And they called me and they said that, oh my God, have we done something wrong? What do we do? Do we take down our social media profile? Where do we go from this? So ultimately, this isn't just about, of course, like I told you earlier, this puts people's physical safety at risk. It harms their mental health, but it's also sending out a bigger signal to not just Muslim women, but the Muslim community at large, that look, we are coming for you. Keep your Muslim women in control, because all these Muslim women, they have a common thread, which is that they are vocal people. They occupy the public space. They use social media actively. Um, and often more 90% of them are critics of the government, or they talk about the hate crimes that have taken place in the country in the last 7 years. So when something like this happens, it's also saying that, look, you need to be reminded what your place actually is, and that's not the public sphere. That's not where you belong. You belong inside your houses. And in fact, the maximum number of people who are today supporting the hijab ban are in fact all the ones who were commenting on these pictures saying, oh Fatima, why don't you wear the hijab? So which is such an irony, because these people just cannot fathom,
Yeah.
their mind is blown when they see a Muslim woman talking in
I,
public, occupying the public space, and it offends their sensibilities.
I just always say that trolling in general, the sort of vicious, targeted, sort of, abuse of women online is actually about silencing women. And of course, if you're Muslim and you're female, I said this in the beginning of the show, there is a kind of double targeting there that cannot be ignored, and that there is, we have to stand up and acknowledge that it is happening, but we'll have to leave it there. There is a large, complex conversation that our legal system needs to have about the principle of bail. But there's a lot more ahead, I'm sure, as we look at all of these different cases. Ms. PK Jain, Kailash, Vasdev, Fatima, Neha, and Geeta. Bhatt, thank you to all of you and to our audience. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow, same time. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.